A relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Mike Volpe. He is currently the CEO at Lola, but he was formerly the CMO of Cybereason, and before that, he was the CMO of HubSpot. We've had Mike on the show before, so if his name sounds familiar and you don't know him because of HubSpot and Cybereason, you may have heard his episode before. But Mike, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to be back on the show.
I've loved our first conversation, Mike, and I actually heard you do an interview on the Seeking Wisdom podcast. I think it was a couple weeks ago with Dave Gearhart, and all the content was phenomenal. And so as soon as I listened to it, I hit you up on Twitter and was like, man, we got to have you back on the show now that you're at Lola. Can you explain to listeners what is Lola, and for those that aren't familiar with it? And then I want to dive into the topic that we're going to be covering today.
Great. Yeah. So Lola.com, we make business travel buttery smooth, is how I best like to describe it. And I think everyone has had the experience that business travel can be a complete mess, whether it's you're the finance person and trying to set a reasonable policy for your company so the employees don't go crazy and to have a good visibility into what they're spending money on when it comes to travel, or as the individual traveler when, there's all sorts of problems that pop up in terms of changing bookings and things like that. And we make both sides of that just a ton easier for an extremely affordable price for your business. So think all those travel management systems that you probably hate, we're the answer when we make all that stuff much better.
It's incredible. And Lola was founded by the same guy that started Kayak, right?
Yeah. So we have a ton of experience within the travel industry and a lot of experience of making the consumer side of it better. And I always like to tell people that, a lot of your listeners are probably, familiar with HubSpot. So if HubSpot and Kayak had a baby, it would be Lola.com because we're the B2B version of Kayak or the travel version of HubSpot, however you want to think about it.
I love it. So Mike, one of the things that you talked with Dave Gearhart about on Seeking Wisdom that I thought would be incredibly helpful for our listeners to hear you talk about as well. You guys started talking about what marketers need to know if they want to become a CEO. You obviously, being CMO at HubSpot, CMO at Cybereason, like marketing background. Now you're the CEO of Lola. And so we were jamming on just a few different ideas, but can you talk at a high level, just to give people a picture of key things that folks need to understand if that is their desire to go from the marketing side of the fence to actually leading an entire company?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the big thing to know is that merely becoming the best marketer in the world is not enough to actually become CEO in many cases, right? So, and I think that's true for actually any discipline within the company, like best CFO in the world or best sales leader in the world or best product leader. None of those alone are enough. I think it's an important and great thing that you can do that will help you become a CEO, but merely doing that is not actually going to get you the CEO job.
Got it. So having an understanding of the entire business, not just one specific unit.
Yeah. You got to remember that as CEO, you're doing in some ways zero jobs. Like you're not doing sales, you're not doing marketing, you're not doing product, you're not doing finance, you're not doing, ops or customer success or service. You're responsible for all of them, but theoretically you're doing none of those jobs. So you're right. It boils down to a lot of having this more of a cross company understanding of the whole business.
Got it. And so to do that as we're talking to the B2B marketer who's maybe at a SaaS startup right now, and they have their eyes on becoming a CEO one day. Does that mean, maybe their next role isn't in marketing? Maybe they look at, doing something in sales or doing something in product. What do you think that career path can look like to get the kind of experience that they need to be able to sit in that CEO seat?
I think that's a great suggestion. I think that you need to play the long game when it comes to your career. And while you may be able to get that promotion a little faster by staying in marketing, if you want to build your skills over the long term, you might be better served taking your, to your point, a job in sales or a job in product or something like that, and broadening that skill set out. I mean, I still rely way back. My first job in my career, first full-time job, was in investment banking. And I learned a ton about finance, how companies are valued, fundraising, accounting, all those things. And that's been, it's useful to me even through to this day today. And so I wouldn't be afraid to kind of maybe theoretically slow your career down by, a promotion, by taking a job somewhere else in the company. It'll, at a minimum, make you a better marketer, but I think it'll also even long-term make you a much better candidate for a CEO job.
Interesting. I also think, I don't know, just my kind of feel about how much I see, and maybe it's because we work with a lot of SaaS companies, and I don't know if it's exclusive to that, to the SaaS space, but I'm seeing a lot of people care about culture, and they're caring deeply about retaining talent and doing, a lot of, oftentimes it's crazy stuff to be able to retain talent. Do you think that there's, if somebody's on the marketing team and they went to their boss and said, "Hey, I want to learn a little bit more about finance," I wonder if there's a way to even get kind of some of that experience by just putting in a little extra hustle and not necessarily having to change companies or change their entire job. But would that be a path as well? Or do you need to be fully immersed, do you think, in your first job?
I think that's a really good idea too. I think there's a lot of side projects you can do, things that are at the intersection of different departments. That can definitely get you a bunch of other experience. The marketing team usually is somebody that works with the finance team on managing the budget and making sure all the expenses are being tracked and allocated properly. That's probably a good place to get involved with a little bit. The other thing is, if you're fortunate enough to be doing, some fundraising, or even, hopefully going through an IPO or things like that, there's a role that a marketing person can play in some of those things as well, if they're willing to to put in some extra time and help with that kind of a process. I think there's things that they could do there too. So I think that's a really good idea. The sort of the side job, the nights and weekends job, to get yourself some more experience. I think that stuff can work really well. I think the other thing too is that the traditional advice would have been to go and get an MBA, and I still think that's valid. But there's a lot of other ways today to take an online course or online mini course on finance, accounting, the sales, product, those types of things, to give yourself some grounding in that skill set as well.
Yeah. And I think even there's so many different pieces of content online as well. So beyond just paid courses, finding YouTube channels, podcasts, reading books about certain functions of the business, I think can give you, I think just gives you more well-rounded business acumen in as a whole, which I think is better for anybody that's trying to really grow and get to that CEO seat. But I love that. There's a lot of different ways to do it. There's not one kind of path.
There's not. Even just reading the Wall Street Journal, right? Mm-hmm. And then I would also encourage people, there's, for publicly traded companies that are in your industry, they have to do all these filings with the SEC, whether it's an annual report, like a 10K, or there's a bunch of other things they have to do. Even downloading one of those, and parts of it are quite dry, but actually reading through those to really understand, okay, well, this is what the public market sees as far as the disclosure of this company, all the financial statements, but there's a whole section in a 10K around business strategy and, management as a whole commentary on what the financial results have been, that whole section. The management discussion analysis section, things like that. And you should read those for 2 or 3 companies that are sort of in your industry. So if you're in the marketing tech space, you should read, Salesforce and HubSpot. If you're in a different industry, then you should read, a different couple from a different company. But there's a ton of stuff out there. You're absolutely right. That is, unpaid and just knowledge that's out there waiting to be tapped.
The other thing I want to talk to you about, Mike, and something that you mentioned offline is thinking through kind of team communication and leadership. Obviously, when, if the person listening to this that kind of has their eye on the CEO role, if they've led a large marketing team, you said there's going to be a lot of similarities if you've, led a big marketing team to leading an entire company. Can you speak to some of the differences, even in just, and you might not have too much, you've only been in the seat at Lola for a few weeks now, but what's been the difference in your leadership and being a CMO versus, being the CEO in terms of communication and leadership?
Yeah, I think there's two major things. I think the first thing is that many marketers have not led a team as large as the whole company would be, right? I was fortunate enough that at HubSpot, because of the rapid growth and because of the strategic importance of marketing there, I was able to lead a 120 person marketing team. And so I went through that experience of leading and managing a team where I didn't know everyone on the team. I knew all their names, but by the end, I'll be honest, I didn't have a detailed understanding of what all 100 plus people exactly were doing. Mm-hmm. And so you end up with this leadership of being much more of a communicator based on, sort of this visionary leadership than it is about actually being, rubbing elbows with every single person, knowing intimately who they were, what they were working on, and things like that. So that is number one, is sort of a higher scale of leadership. Because even, a small company, as CEO, you're going to have a much larger team than just what the marketing team is. So that's one dimension of it. The second dimension, which is also true for me, because I went from leading at Cyberreason, a team responsible for marketing, but also an inside sales team and also a BDR team. So some other responsibilities, but now at Lola, theoretically, I have the whole company. So it's, sales, marketing, product, like all these different things. Learning how to communicate with all those folks is also a little different. Like I was getting an email or a Slack message from an engineer last week asking me some questions about customer acquisition that were, if you were an engineer, they were very good questions. If you were a marketer, it would indicate that you lacked a basic understanding of some marketing related things. And so as a CMO, you never would have had to have answered that question or think about communicating that basic level of information. But what it reminded me was that not everyone in the company has the information or the background that I have in sales and marketing and things like that. And so when I have a company-wide meeting, don't be afraid to go back to the basics around like what is customer acquisition cost and how do you measure that? And what are the tools that you use to make it lower? And where should we feel like that should be at our stage of business and things like that? Just like if I had been an engineer previously, I would probably think that people knew a lot about, different frameworks and how to build products and structures or things like that. And, somebody in marketing might not. So I think the second thing you need to remember is just that you're talking to the whole company and don't be afraid to get down to the basic level of being clear about what you're talking about. And don't be afraid to like explain things at a really basic level, because a lot of people come from very different areas of the business.
Yeah. Another piece that you mentioned, Mike, offline, you talked about kind of the external facing elements of, being a CEO with, managing the board and speaking publicly on behalf of the company. Can you speak to kind of what are some things that you did when you were, still in marketing roles that set you up to be able to do those types of kind of external facing aspects of your responsibilities now?
And this is one where I think as a marketer, head of marketing, you actually can do a fair amount of this and prepare yourself for the sort of that CEO role. So I was, especially at HubSpot, I've always been sort of willing to take on part of the public face of the company. I spoke at tons of conferences and events, lots of podcasts. I was a host of a podcast that we launched at HubSpot. I spoke at, 100 to 200 plus events over my time there, did tons of different webinars and was just willing to sort of be one of the people that was the outward facing spokesperson for the company. And as CEO, that's definitely ends up being, for better or worse, a big portion of your job. I'm already doing a lot of like PR related things, being asked to speak at events, all sorts of things like that now. And as CEO, I think that's one of the things you can do that's like part of your job to help market and grow the company, is just sort of be public and visible. But I do think that as somebody grows up through the marketing ranks, you have an opportunity to do that at many companies as the marketer, because you should be the master of the customer, the value prop, and the story of the company. And there's no reason why you can't, be more public and get some good training in that whole area, but because that's an important part of the role.
I mean, you even see that in what Drift is doing, and really Dave Gerhardt's role, being VP of marketing there. But when I think of Drift, I think of David Cancel and Dave Gerhardt. And so I think companies are starting to embrace that. Folks, they want that, they understand that the brand of their company is really the sum total of the personal brands of the people working there. And so like taking some initiative, if you're on the marketing team and saying, hey, I want to start developing my personal brand and putting myself out there and being a face that people associate with, the company I think of, another company in addition to Drift is a company called Lucid out of Salt Lake City, and I know when I think of Lucid, there are three specific people in my head. Their COO, their creative director, and one of the guys on their marketing team. Those are the people I think of when I think of Lucid, because they care about their personal brand. They're putting out content on a regular basis, personally, like through LinkedIn and different channels, Instagram, stuff like that. So I think being proactive and just doing that, I don't necessarily, maybe depending on your organization, maybe you need some permission there, but I think a lot of that is just you being proactive as a person and owning that and taking a step forward. And I think your company is going to appreciate it.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think that really harkens to the point that it doesn't have to be even you as head of marketing doing it. I think that one of the things we did well at HubSpot was, Brian and Dharmesh were out there, but I was out there. Mark Robert, who ran sales for a long time, was out there. And then even people from within the marketing team, Rebecca Corliss, Ellie Merman, Kip Bodner, a bunch of other folks, and Dave Gerhardt, when he was at HubSpot too, did a lot of stuff that helped grow not only their brands, but the brand of the company. And I know some people knew HubSpot through like Rebecca Corliss. Other people knew it through somebody else, right? Yeah. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be just one person. You're much better off if it's a lot of people. It just adds to the volume and the number of interactions that people can have. And I think traditionally companies, it was only the CEO, but I think today in this world, people are starting to figure out that it could be lots of people. And even look at Drift, you're right, Dave Gerhardt is behind a lot of it, but there's a sales rep named Derek Kelleher who started to do some video stuff there, and a bunch of other people as well. So,
Maggie Crowley on their product team is a host, one of the co-hosts of Seeking Wisdom on the Build show that they're doing for that. So yeah, I totally agree.
Right. Exactly right.
The last thing I want to talk to you about, Mike, you spoke offline about, the strategy component of this, when you're sitting in the CEO role and needing to have an understanding of the short term and the long term strategy, the direction of the business. Can you speak to us about what you did earlier in your career to give yourself that kind of strategic thinking ability?
Well, I'm not, we have to wait 3 or 4 years to judge if I have the strategic thinking ability for sure. But I think that, I did get an MBA from MIT, and there were a number of classes there where we would analyze the strategy of different companies and debate sort of different options there. And I do think that kind of training, I think, was helpful. The other thing that was really helpful for me, not only around the strategy point, but even, management and leadership, was just having had the opportunity to see a few different top tier management teams work from even back to the SolidWorks days. That was a great team back in the day, really successful company that grew fast and had an awesome acquisition as an outcome, through to HubSpot, to Cybereason. And then even I'm an advisor to a lot of other companies, and sort of seeing that. And I even, I've been an outside board member at a few companies as well. And it's more just getting yourself out there, getting an opportunity to see it at as many companies as possible and really think about that. And then I really think it's those types of things. I think it's a really hard thing to sort of learn and necessarily be good at. Yeah. The final thing I'll say though on that is I think more important than picking the world's perfect strategy is just being dedicated to it and clearly articulating it to your team. So I found, at least here so far at Volvo.com, that more important than being like the exact right strategy is having everyone on the same page going in the same direction, even if the direction is 100% perfect. That's more valuable than sort of this, lack of leadership. And sometimes making decisions is more important than making the right decision.
I love that. That's incredible. Mike, thank you so much for your time today. If there's somebody listening to this, they want to stay connected with you, learn more about Lola.com, what's the best way for them to go about staying connected?
Yeah. So, if you do any travel for business or whatever, check us out at Lola.com. We also have a great mobile app in the App Store as well. And then me personally, probably the best place is Twitter. I'm M Volpe on Twitter. And I'm relatively active there, but LinkedIn and other places as well.
Love it. Awesome, Mike. Well, thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I think this is going to be incredibly valuable to listeners. So thanks a lot.
Happy to be on the show again. Thanks for having me.
Becoming a thought leader doesn't just happen. If you want to build a strong personal brand and extend your reach online and offline, you need a plan. Want help developing yours? Check out Impact Summit. This one-day event is bringing together best-selling authors, professional athletes, influential CEOs, and emerging entrepreneurs, all for one purpose: to equip you to lead, influence, and inspire. Whether you're looking to build a lasting legacy with your business or extend the reach of your brand, Impact Summit speakers will share inspiring stories and practical lessons to help you on your way. Did we mention a session on launching and growing a podcast? You guessed it. You'll hear from Sweetfish Media's own James Carberry during that session. You won't want to miss all of these influencers and leaders coming together in Salt Lake City on October 13th. Ready to learn more? Check out influencerinc.co/Impact Summit. B2B Growth listeners can get 15% off the price of their tickets for this event by using the promo code SWEETFISH. SWEETFISH. So use that code, get your tickets today, and get ready to grow your brand and your influence at Impact Summit 2018.